But on this particular day, as a formidable rainstorm began to gather its forces on the horizon, the fabric of my reality was about to be torn apart. The universe, it seemed, had grown tired of my invisibility and was preparing to thrust me into the spotlight. An event was set in motion that would ripple through the rest of my existence, changing everything I knew about myself and my place in the world. On this day, under the darkening Ghanaian sky, I was finally about to be seen. The day my life was irrevocably altered began in a way that was indistinguishable from any other, under the oppressive weight of the morning air in the bustling heart of Accra. This atmosphere was a dense, heavy blanket, woven from a tapestry of scents so familiar they were practically a part of me. The sweet, smoky perfume of roasting corn from the street-side vendors, the acrid, chemical sting of diesel fumes from the endless, noisy parade of TRO and taxis, and the fine, ever-present red dust that seemed to coat every surface, including the very pores of my own skin. My name is 𝐏𝐫𝐸, and in that long-ago chapter of my life, I was simply a girl, an orphan whose only sanctuary and home was a fleeting, shifting shade cast by a grand old mango tree near the chaotic vortex of Makola Market. This small patch of shadow was my entire world, its boundaries defined by the faded, threadbare Kent wrapper I used as a bed and the persistent, gnawing ache of hunger that was my most constant and unwelcome companion. I was a child adrift in the sea of humanity, without a mother or a father to call my own, possessing nothing tangible in this world but a worn, cracked plastic begging bowl and a resilient spirit that, against all odds, stubbornly refused to be shattered into a million pieces. To the countless people who swarmed the market streets like a river of purpose, I was less than a person. I was a fleeting shadow, a ghost haunting the periphery of their hurried, important lives, a silent fixture of the landscape. Most would walk directly past me, their eyes sliding over my small form without a second glance, their minds already leaping ahead to their destinations, their errands, their families. I was a detail they chose not to see, as unremarkable as the loose stones underfoot or the discarded plastic bags that danced in the gutters. This invisibility was my curse, a cloak of profound and crushing loneliness. My days were a monotonous, grinding cycle of pure survival, a relentless and exhausting effort to gather enough meager coins to quiet the angry, rumbling protests of my empty stomach. Each sunrise brought with it the exact same challenge, the same quiet, gnawing desperation that settled deep in my bones. I had become a student of human nature out of necessity, learning to read the subtle cues in the faces of the crowd, to anticipate the meandering paths of potentially generous, and to instinctively shrink away from the hardened expressions of the scornful. The world was a vast, indifferent, and overwhelmingly loud stage, and I was a minor, silent player, speaking no lines and drawing no attention from the audience. This anonymity was both a curse and a shield, protecting me from the more overt dangers of the street, but also locking me into a prison of solitude. Yet, even in the depths of that solitude, I held on to a sliver of irrational hope, a deeply private and fiercely guarded belief that my life was not destined to be an endless, desolate stretch of empty days. I would sit for hours, watching families walk together through the crowded lanes, their laughter echoing like a language from another world. And I would allow myself to imagine what it would be like to belong to someone, to have a hand to hold that didn't let go. I would see other children, their faces scrubbed clean and their bodies clad in crisp school uniforms. And I would drift into daydreams of a life where my biggest worry was not the gnawing fear of starvation, but the abstract challenge of homework. These were my secret fantasies, delicate wisps of smoke and harsh, unforgiving reality of my world. But they were my own private treasure, a tiny kernel of warmth I nurtured in the pervasive coldness of my isolation. This internal world was my only true escape, a place I could retreat to when the hunger became too sharp or the sting of a cruel word became too painful. In my mind, I could conjure the taste of foods I had only ever smelled, the feeling of a soft bed I had never slept in, and the sound of mother's voice I could barely remember. This act of dreaming was an act of defiance, a refusal to let the harshness of the streets extinguish the entirety of my spirit. It was a declaration that even if the world saw me as nothing more than a shadow, I knew there was a person inside, a girl who dared to hope for a sunnier day, a different life, a future that was not yet written in the dust of the market. Every single morning was an urgent, silent race against a rising sun, a desperate competition I could not afford to lose. I would awaken as the first ethereal calls to prayer drifted melodically through the awakening city, my small body aching and stiff in the unforgiving hardness of the packed earth that served as my bed. My first and most critical mission was always the same. To find enough 𝐿𝐴 was to purchase a single heavy ball of kente. This sour, fermented corn dough was more than just sustenance. It was a dense, filling substance capable of silencing the angry, churning rebellion in my belly for a few precious hours, a strategic tool that allowed me to focus my mind on the larger, more complex challenge of the day's survival. To achieve this, I would strategically position myself near the chaotic 𝐇𝐨𝐴 station, a dizzying whirlwind of human activity where brightly colored, battered minibuses departed for every conceivable corner of the city, their drivers' assistants or mates, bellowing their destinations, circle, 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 or 𝐏𝐨𝐴, while people scrambled and pushed, desperate to climb aboard and continue with the forward momentum of their lives. With my small plastic bowl held out before me, a silent and hopeful extension of myself, I would adopt an expression I have perfected over countless years, a careful, calculated blend of hopeful sorrow designed to stir at least a flicker of pity in the hearts of the relentless stream of passers-by. "Auntie, please," I would whisper, my voice barely audible above the cacophony of engines and shouting. "Uncle, God bless you." More often than not, my pleas were met with a practiced indifference. People hurried past, their faces deliberately turned away, their gazes fixed on some distant, unseen point to avoid the uncomfortable obligation of meeting my eyes. Sometimes their hushed comments would drift back to me, sharp and piercing as shards of glass. "That's the orphan girl," I would hear them murmur to each other as they passed. "She has no one." Each word was like a tiny, sharp stone thrown directly at me. But over time, I had learned to construct a formidable, invisible wall around my heart, a necessary fortification to block out the searing pain and preserve my fragile will to survive. Even in the confines of my own desperate small world, a world defined by what I lacked, I fought with every fiber of my being to hold on to a piece of my humanity, a sliver of the compassionate heart that I knew still beat steadily within me. That very morning, a moment of unexpected and profound grace had occurred. An old, stooped man with kind, crinkled eyes had paused in his slow shuffle and dropped a shiny 1 CD coin into my bowl. In my universe, this was a small fortune, a gleaming treasure that promised more than just a momentary reprieve from hunger. With the coin, I purchased 2 generous, fragrant pieces of golden, fried yam and was just about to devour them greedily when my eyes fell upon little Kofi. He was another street child, even younger and thinner than I, huddled by a filthy, overflowing gutter, his small face etched with a familiar, hollow look of deep and painful hunger. A war raged within me for a split second, the primal, instinctual urge to keep this rare bounty for myself versus the gentle, insistent pull of empathy. The latter won. I broke one of the precious, warm pieces in half and gave the larger portion to him. He didn't utter a single word of thanks. He just ate with desperate, focused intensity that I understood completely, and that in itself was thanks enough. My own hunger felt a little less sharp, a little less demanding after that small act of sharing. As the early afternoon sun climbed higher in the sky, reaching its zenith, the heavens began a slow and dramatic transformation. The brilliant, uninterrupted blue of the morning was slowly but surely being consumed by a menacing congregation of heavy, bruised gray clouds that carried the unmistakable, metallic scent and promise of serious downpour. A strange, almost unnatural stillness fell over the usually boisterous market, the normal cacophony of commerce softening as the air grew thick, still, and humid with unspoken anticipation. Seeking refuge from the inevitable deluge, I found a small, dry alcove by a closed shop, a meager but welcome shelter where I could wait out the approaching storm. It was from this specific vantage point that I first heard it, a sound that cut cleanly through the expectant quiet like a knife. It was a soft but desperate cry of pure pain. My eyes scanned the street, searching for the source of the sound, and landed on a figure across the busy, chaotic road. A woman was leaning heavily against a whitewashed wall, her body contorted in obvious distress. She was dressed exquisitely, in a vibrant yellow 𝐏𝐵𝐴 top and a matching green headscarf that spoke of wealth and taste. But her beautiful clothes were disheveled and stained with dust, and her face was a mask of pure, unadulterated agony. Her belly was large and round, announcing her advanced pregnancy to the world. She clutched her side, her breath coming in ragged, shallow gasps that were painful to watch. She looked utterly and completely lost, like a magnificent butterfly caught in the violent, merciless throes of a hurricane. People on the street would glance at her, their expressions a fleeting mixture of mild curiosity and deep-seated suspicion, before quickly moving on. A few market women standing nearby whispered amongst themselves, shaking their heads with detached, useless pity. One man, bolder and crueler than the rest, muttered loudly, "She must be cursed to be in such a state all alone." But nobody, not a single person, moved to help her. They just stared, passive witnesses to a suffering they deliberately chose to keep at a safe and comfortable distance. My heart began to hammer against my ribs with a frantic, suffocating rhythm that stole my breath. A powerful, primal part of me, the part that learned through years of bitter experience that survival meant minding your own business, staying small and fading into background, screamed at me to stay put, to remain in the relative safety of my hidden alcove. I was nothing, a beggar with empty hands and a stained reputation, a complete and utter nobody in the grand, complex scheme of the city. What possible help could I offer to a woman who looked like she owned the world? I had no money, no influence, no resources, not even a phone to call for help. To interfere felt like a dangerous overstepping of the invisible lines that divided our worlds. But then she let out another pained sob, a sound so raw and vulnerable that it sliced directly through my carefully constructed walls of fear and self-preservation, striking a chord deep within me. In that singular moment, I no longer saw a stranger or a wealthy woman who was far removed from my reality. I saw a mother in desperate, terrifying trouble, an old, faded, and almost forgotten memory of my own mother's face, a gentle, hazy image from a life long past, flashed in my mind's eye with a startling and unexpected clarity. It was a feeling more than a picture, a sense of warmth and safety that I had not felt in years. It was a reminder of the universal bond between a mother and child, a bond that was about to be forged in crisis right before my eyes. I could not simply sit there and watch her suffer. My conscience, a part of me I had long thought dormant, wouldn't allow it. With a sudden surge of resolve, I bolted from my hiding place, darting across the road with a reckless abandon that defied the usual dangers of Accra's chaotic traffic. I didn't think. I just moved, my body acting on an impulse that came from a place deeper than fear. I dodged a swerving bicycle whose rider shouted an insult, and a speeding taxi that blared its horn in a long, angry protest, my bare feet slapping against the hot, dusty pavement that burned the soles of my feet. The world narrowed to a single focus, reaching her side. Finally, I reached her and knelt in the dirt at her side, my own grubby, dust-covered hands reaching out to tentatively touch her arm, a gesture of connection that felt both bold and necessary. "Annie, are you okay?" I asked, my voice small and trembling, yet somehow clear and steady in the charged air between us. She flinched violently at my unexpected touch, her eyes flying open. They were wide with a potent and terrifying combination of overwhelming fear and excruciating, blinding pain. For a moment, she looked at me, a street urchin in torn and filthy clothes, and her initial terror seemed to soften just slightly as she registered my face. Not the face of a threat, but just a child's face, filled with genuine, unfeigned worry and nothing else. Her fingers, which were adorned with rings that probably cost more than I would see in a lifetime, gripped my small hand with desperate, surprising force, her knuckles white. "Please," she whispered, her voice cracking with the immense strain of her body's ordeal. "Help me. My baby, I think the baby is coming." The words hung in the air between us, heavy with a significance that I could barely comprehend. In that moment, the vast social chasm between us disappeared completely. We were no longer a rich woman and a poor girl. We were two human beings, one in desperate need of help, and the other, against all logic, trying to provide it. The weight of her trust in her life settled onto my small shoulders. A tidal wave of pure, undiluted panic crashed over me, threatening to drown my newfound resolve. I was just a girl, a child who knew everything about hunger, loneliness, and hardship, but what did I know about childbirth? Absolutely nothing. My mind went completely blank, a slate wiped clean by sheer terror. But then, pushing through the thick fog of fear, a piece of practical advice surfaced from the depths of my memory. It came from a kind nurse at a free clinic I had visited once, a woman who had treated a deep cut on my foot with gentle hands and a warmer smile. "When someone is in trouble, F you, she had said, looking me straight in the eye with an intensity that made me feel seen. Your voice is your greatest tool. Yell for help. Yell as loud as you possibly can." I stood up, my legs shaky beneath me, took a deep, shuddering breath that filled my small lungs to their capacity, and I screamed, "Please, somebody help." My voice was high and thin, a fragile, reedy sound against the constant cacophony of the city. It was filled with an urgent power I didn't know I possessed. It was a scream born of desperation and fear, but also of a fierce, protective instinct. This woman needs a doctor. She's having a baby. A few people looked over, their faces startled by my sudden, piercing outburst. For a brief, hopeful second, I had captured a flicker of their attention. But just as I had their eyes, the heavens opened up. The rain began, not with a gentle, warning drizzle, but with a sudden, torrential downpour that soaked everyone and everything in a matter of seconds, as if a celestial bucket had been overturned. The already distracted crowd scattered instantly, a flurry of motion as they ran for the cover of awnings and doorways. Just like that, the woman and I were alone again, completely abandoned in the heart of the deluge. The woman groaned loudly, a deep, guttural sound of agony, slumping further down the wall as another powerful contraction seized her body. Without a second of hesitation, I untied the faded Kent wrapper from around my waist. My blanket, my dress, my only real worldly possession, a fabric that held the scent of my entire life, and draped it over her trembling shoulders. It was a futile but heartfelt attempt to shield her from the chilling, relentless rain. I huddled close to her, pressing my small body against hers for warmth, using my torn, soaked sleeve to wipe the mixture of rain and sweat from her forehead. "It's okay," I said, my own voice trembling but imbued with a strange, new firmness. "You're gonna be okay. I'm right here with you." I just kept repeating those words, a desperate mantra, as much for my own courage as for her comfort. It felt like an eternity passed, with just me and the suffering stranger, a tiny, isolated island of shared humanity, in a sea of rushing, muddy water that flooded the street around us. The world had shrunk to the space beneath my tattered Kent, to the sound of her pain breathing and the frantic beating of my own heart. Finally, through the thick, gray curtain of rain, a beat-up taxi, its yellow paint chipped and faded, screeched to a halt beside us. The driver, a man with a weary but kind face, stared at our small, desperate tableau with wide, disbelieving eyes. He didn't hesitate for a single moment. He jumped out of his car and straight into the downpour, becoming soaked instantly. "What is happening here? We have to get her to the hospital." Together, the kind-hearted driver and I, a strange and unlikely team, managed to lift the heavy, groaning woman into the back seat of the car. I scrambled in right after her, my small hand still clutching hers tightly, refusing to let go. The driver sped through the rapidly flooding streets, laying on the horn incessantly, creating a path where there was none, the windshield wipers fighting a losing battle against the relentless storm. I held her hand the entire way, whispering that she'd be okay, that help was coming, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against the deafening roar of the rain on the car's tin roof. At the hospital, everything became a chaotic, overwhelming blur of bright lights, urgent voices, and swift motion. Nurses in crisp, white uniforms ran out with a gurney the moment we pulled up to the entrance. They took her from me, her hand finally slipping from mine, and rushed her through the wide emergency doors. And then, just as suddenly as it had all begun, I was completely alone again, standing in a spreading puddle at the hospital entrance, shivering uncontrollably in my thin, soaked shirt. My precious Kent wrapper was gone, swallowed by the emergency. I waited. I don't know why, but I felt a profound, inexplicable need to stay, to see the story through to its end. Hours crawled by at an agonizing pace. The rain slowed to a drizzle, and then stopped. The sky began to clear. Finally, a nurse emerged from the sliding doors. She looked exhausted, but she was smiling a wide, beautiful smile. She looked down at me, her eyes softening with a gentle kindness. "Are you the girl who brought in the pregnant woman?" I could only nod, my throat too tight and choked with a storm of emotions to speak. "You are a very brave girl," she said, her voice soft and full of genuine admiration. "You saved her life. You saved them both. If you hadn't stayed with her, if you hadn't called for help, she and her baby might have died out there in the rain." A warmth spread through my chest, a profound, glowing feeling I hadn't experienced in a very, very long time. It was a sensation better than a full belly of kente, better even than finding a warm, dry place to sleep. For the first time that I could remember, I didn't feel invisible. I felt like I mattered. A few days passed, and the familiar, harsh rhythms of my life slowly, inevitably, settled back into their well-worn patterns. The profound warmth that the nurse's validating words had ignited within me began to fade, its brilliant glow dimming against the sharp, undeniable reality of being hungry, alone, and completely invisible once more. I was back under the protective shade of my mango tree, my empty plastic bowl resting in my lap, a silent and stark testament to my unchanged circumstances. I had managed to find another piece of discarded cloth to use as a wrapper, but it was a poor, soulless replacement, lacking the history and ingrained comfort of my old Kent. I thought about the woman and her new baby often, sending silent, hopeful wishes for their well-being out into the vast universe. But I never, for a single moment, expected to see her again. In the rigid, unwritten rules of our world, people like her, with her hinted wealth and effortless beauty, do not remain in the lives of people like me. Our paths were meant to cross in a moment of crisis, not to merge into a shared journey. Then, one sun-drenched afternoon, an object of such profound and alien foreignness appeared that it seemed to bend the very fabric of reality of the market around it. A sleek, black car, so impossibly polished and shiny that it reflected the puffy white clouds in the sky like a dark mirror, pulled up silently at the edge of the market. You simply do not see cars like that in this part of the city. Its presence was an anomaly, and it brought the usual market hustle to a stunned, momentary halt. Everyone stared, their mouths agape, their eyes wide with a potent mixture of awe, envy, and deep suspicion. A man in a sharp, impeccably tailored suit that must have cost a fortune emerged from the driver's side and walked with quiet, dignified purpose to the back door, opening it with a respectful air usually reserved for presidents or kings. My heart, which had been beating its usual slow, steady rhythm of monotonous survival, suddenly stopped dead in my chest. Out of the cool, dark, mysterious interior of the car stepped a woman from the storm. But she was utterly transformed, remade into a vision of elegance. Her hair was no longer matted and damp with rain and sweat, but perfectly styled in an elegant arrangement that cascaded over her shoulders. She wore a stunning dress made of the finest, most luxurious Kent cloth I had ever seen, a fabric that shimmered with deep blues and golds and flowed with her every movement, cradled gently and expertly in her arms. Wrapped in a soft, snow-white blanket was a tiny, peacefully sleeping baby. She was no longer the struggling, desperate woman from the side of the road. She radiated an unmistakable aura of wealth, power, and an unshakable, serene confidence. She paused for a moment, her eyes scanning the crowded, dusty area, her gaze deliberate and intensely searching. And then, her eyes locked onto mine. With a grace that seemed entirely out of place amidst the dirt and grime of the market, she walked directly toward me, her expensive-looking heels clicking softly on the dusty ground. The crowd, which had been a thick, impassable wall just moments before, simply melted away for her, creating a clear, silent path as if for royalty. She didn't stop until she was standing right in front of me, and then she did something that sent a palpable shockwave through the stunned onlookers. She knelt down in front of me, right there in the dirt and filth of the market, completely unconcerned about my torn, ragged clothes or my bare, calloused feet. She smiled, a radiant, brilliant expression that lit up her entire face, and I could see that her eyes were full of unshed tears, glistening like diamonds in the afternoon sun. "I found you," she said, her voice thick with a powerful, undisguised emotion that made my own throat tighten painfully. "I've been looking everywhere for you since I left the hospital." I was utterly, completely speechless, my mind unable to form a single word or coherent thought. "My name is Madame Abina," she continued, her voice soft but carrying a clear authority. My family owns one of the largest textile businesses in the entire country. That day, my driver had been in a terrible accident, and my phone's battery was dead. I was desperately trying to get to a private clinic when the labor pain started, far earlier than anyone expected. I was so scared, so desperate, and nobody would help me. They saw my messy clothes, my distress, and they judged me. But you had absolutely nothing, and yet you gave me everything. You gave me your voice, your comfort, and your only shelter from the storm. She gently adjusted the sleeping baby in her arms so I could see her tiny, perfect face. This is my daughter, 𝐏𝐫𝐥. I named her 𝐿𝐫𝐫 after you, because without you, my brave girl, neither of us would be here today. Tears that I hadn't realized I was holding back began to stream down my face, hot trails that washed away some of the grime from my cheeks. Madame 𝐵𝐵𝐵 reached out a gentle hand and wiped them away. You saved my family, she said, her voice now firm with an unbreakable conviction. Now, let me make you a part of mine. I want to adopt you, 𝐿𝐵𝐵𝐵. I want to give you a home, an education, a future. I want to be your mother. It felt like a dream, a vivid, impossible hallucination born of hunger and the heat of the sun. It had to be. Things like this just don't happen to girls like me. But the tangible warmth of her hand on my cheek and the undeniable weight of her incredible words felt so intensely, breathtakingly real. In that single breathtaking moment, on the familiar shade of that old mango tree, my life split cleanly into two distinct halves. The long, hard, lonely time before and the unbelievable, hopeful, and dazzling beginning of after. I now live in a house so vast it feels like a palace, with more rooms than I can possibly count or keep track of, each one bigger than the entire patch of ground I used to call home. The floors are cool and polished marble under my feet. The walls are adorned with beautiful, vibrant art, and there is always more than enough food to eat, a fact that still fills me with a quiet sense of wonder. Every single morning, instead of faded, torn wrapper, I put on a clean, crisp school uniform, and my biggest worry is no longer about where my next meal will come from, but about the abstract complexities of my mathematics homework. I have a mother, Madame 𝐵𝐵𝐵, who tucks me in at night with a gentle kiss on my forehead and helps me with my studies. And I have a baby sister, little 𝐏𝐵𝐵, whose gurgles and bright, toothless smiles fill the house with pervasive joy I never knew existed. This transformation has been more than just physical or material. It has been a complete rebirth of my entire being, a healing of wounds I didn't even know I had. I am no longer the invisible, forgotten orphan girl from a cola market, the shadow on the periphery of other people's lives. I am 𝐿𝐵𝐵𝐵, a daughter, a student, a big sister. I am seen. I am cherished. I am deeply and unconditionally loved. When my mother, Madame 𝐵𝐵𝐵, looks at me, she doesn't see a charity case or a former beggar. She sees her child, her family, her hero. The cavernous emptiness that once echoed inside my chest has been filled with a sense of belonging so profound and so powerful that it still brings tears to my eyes in quiet moments. My new life is a world away from the dust, the noise, and the desperation of the streets. But I carry the memory of that former life with me every single day. It is not a painful burden, but a constant, humbling reminder where I came from and the incredible, improbable journey I have been on. It's a reminder that my life was not ultimately changed by the sudden appearance of money or luxury, but by a simple act of human kindness, offered without any expectation of reward at a moment when it was needed most desperately. My story, a journey from the gutter to a grand house, stands as a living testament to a powerful and universal truth. You do not need to possess everything in the world to give something truly meaningful. Often, the most valuable and life-altering gifts we can offer are not material at all. It might be a voice raised to help someone in need when others are silent, a comforting hand on a trembling shoulder, or the simple, profound act of sharing the little that you have with someone who is even less. Sometimes a small, seemingly insignificant measure of compassion is all it takes to completely and utterly transform a life, setting in motion a chain of events that can lead to unimaginable blessings and a future brighter than one could ever dare to dream. So you see, it doesn't really matter what you have in your pockets or in your bank account. What truly and profoundly matters is what you have in your heart. The capacity for empathy, the courage to act on that empathy, and the fundamental willingness to see the shared humanity in others are the greatest and most valuable treasures a person can ever possess. A single act of kindness, no matter how small or insignificant it may seem at the time, can create a ripple of goodness that spreads further than you can imagine, a reward of love and belonging that lasts an entire lifetime.